So, first lecture in this series of Freedom Mike lectures, and the title you see, Oats and Potatoes in Irish Agriculture. It was titled that was given to me, but it's actually quite interesting because oats and potatoes would have been considered to be the poor foods in Irish agriculture. Oats, they said that wheat was for the king, barley for the nobleman, and oats for the poor man. According to 8th century Irish law tract. So we're starting off at a low level, and again, the history of potatoes in Ireland always associated with the famine and to some extent with the poorer classes of cottiers. So if we go back to the very start almost, I've got a very poor photograph here of the Katy fields in County Mayo. This is one of the earliest pieces of evidence for agriculture in Ireland, and indeed one of the earliest pieces of Neolithic agriculture evidence across Europe. The site is extensive and contains the oldest known field system in the world. Various dating methods place the date back at approximately 3,500 BC, so almost 5,000 years ago. Now, there was no oats grown in these Katy fields. Agriculture back then was based around dairy production, and there were pastoralists. This is one of the reasons that there's so many fields. They reckoned that the field pattern reflected milk production, because the calves have taken off the cows in order to allow the early farmers to milk the cows, and the cows had to kept somewhere else. But within these field patterns, we found evidence of wheat being grown, wheat being emmer wheat, a very early form of wheat. Now, as you probably all know, cereals were first investigated in the Near East, around about Mesopotamia, Syria, and Israel. In that kind of an area. So that's where wheat and barley were domesticated, maybe 10,000 years BC, about 12,000 years ago, the early Neolithic times. Oats was a much later domestication. Oats were just oats grown. Oats were really started off as a wheat crop within the barley and the wheat, and as the Neolithic farmers moved through Europe and got to maybe somewhere around northern Europe, an area of what is now Germany, it seems to be that the oats as the wheat crop were kind of taken over some of the cereal crops. We know wild oat, which is still considered to be a wheat, but at some point they were able to domesticate it, and by domesticate it, the wild oat, the grains fall off very easily, sort of at various times. It's not a close harvest period, but whatever happened in the domestication process, and the same with wheat, that they were able to get the crops to sort of the grain to hold on to the ears until a more certain time, at which point they were able to cut it and store it. So oats was actually domesticated at some point in time, about 3,500 years ago in northern Europe. The first evidence of it then in Ireland comes in the Bronze Age, so we're talking about 1200 BC. So you would go back then to in the 5th century BC, we go back a long way there again to Greek times. You have certain Greek philosophers and scientists having things to say about oats. Hippocrates said of oatmeal and porridge that it moistens and refreshes, and Diocles in the 4th century BC, and all the medical writers said it was actually better than barley. However, the Ophrafocus, a 3rd century BC philosopher, said it exhausted the soil. Pliny, a Roman naturalist in the 2nd century, said it was a wheat. and Gallon also in the 2nd century said it was only fit for draft animals and not for men. So kind of a mixed history with oats there. Just another picture there of oats in the ripening stage. It's quite a different grain from wheat and barley in that you have this sort of hanging head rather than the tight head that you would get for barley grains and for barley ears and wheat ears. As mentioned earlier, this is only sort of indicative print I could get off ancient Ireland. An old 8th century law tract described wheat as a fruit of kings or bishops or superior poets. Barley was the fruit of nobles, and wheat oats was the fruit of the common man. But along with barley, in those sort of early Christian times, around 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th century, it was the most common of the grains in Ireland. Wheat, although it was the fruit of kings, was hard to grow in the damp Atlantic climate. It was valuable for bread making, but it's really only that southeastern area of Ireland that would have been able to grow the sort of quality wheat that would have been suitable for bread making. If you think about the country, especially after the urban invasions, and you have the Pale around Dublin, which was an area of very much of English influence, that had been the sort of the main wheat growing area, and the agriculture there would have reflected kind of a traditional English agriculture with wheat being grown and quite a few cereals. Once you move, as I say, beyond the Pale into Celtic Ireland, you move away from cereal production and that sort of more typical English agriculture of the Middle Ages to a more pastoralist agriculture, where the main products was mainly based around cattle products, and butter and milk were two of the primary foods in early Irish agriculture. The land wouldn't have been sown that much in cereals, although oats and barley would have been sold. One of the reasons for this was probably to do with the conflict that was sort of always going on at a low level. It was easy to burn crops in the field, but it wasn't so easy to kill all your cattle. So for that reason, maybe that was one of the reasons that the early agriculture in Ireland was based more around cattle than oats, than cereals. Plus the climate wasn't just the best for growing cereals. Some nice photographs here from the Green Collection, which would be showing how oats would have been planted around about the turn of a century. Nice wee one here of the plough man behind the two horses. Cereal ground was always had to be ploughed. The difference between a plough in the early 20th century and a plough in the 14th or 15th century would have been the earlier plough would have been made of wood. It would have been pulled maybe by oxen or even more horses, 3 or 4 or 5 horses, or 4 or 6 horses. The plough, although it would have turned to the ground, it wouldn't have turned it over very well. Instead of having one ploughman, it might have had 2 or 3, one to lead the horses, one to steady the plough, one to hold the plough into the ground, and maybe another man coming back to push the furrows into place. Like early ploughs were of technologically very much inferior to the kind of plough that we see here. But no matter what, the ground had to be ploughed. Those early ploughs, there's people will talk about ground being ploughed maybe once in autumn and then twice again in the springtime, just to try and break it up because the quality of the ploughs were so bad. Quite similar. So once the ground was ploughed, quite often, even when I was young, you heard old farmers talking about sowing the corn on the furrow. Now in Ireland, or this part of, and where I came from in West Tyrone, corn always referred to oats. You know, whereas if you're in England, corn will always refer to wheat, and if you're in America, corn will refer to maize. And the reason for this is that corn basically refers to the most common grain that you have in a particular area. So our corn, or my corn, when I was growing up, was always oats, whereas Englishman's corn would have been wheat. So, like I said, they talked about sowing corn on the furrow. And the reason that they talked, which I couldn't really understand when I was growing up, because the furrows were quite big, and to sow corn in the furrow wouldn't make a lot of sense. But whenever you ploughed with horses, the furrows were quite small, and whenever you sowed the corn on the furrow, and then the ground was made ready over the top of it. The seed was quite deep, but not very deep. Corn likes a greater depth in the soil to start off growing than wheat or barley, so it would be the only one that you ever hear I've talked about being sowed in the furrow. So again, the guy here, he's got what they call a bag apron, and he's just casting the seed by hand, and then the ground's been made ready after that there. The other way then is with the corn fiddle, which was a more efficient and better method of distribution. So the seed was planted in the ground, the corn or the grain was covered in soil, and then the final stage was then the ground might have been rolled over the top of it to give a good firm contact between the grain and the soil, and also then to make sure that any small stones pushed into the ground so that when it came to harvest they wouldn't damage the side. There's quite a few references to the growing of oats and other grains in the statistical surveys of the various counties. McAvoy in County Tyrone would have talked about different rotations. The rotation, and this is 1802, oats, flax, and then oats, and then did the fallow, or potatoes, barley, oats, and then flax, or in mountain areas, potatoes, and then oats. There was no real fertilizer other than animal manure at that point in time, so the ground had to be rested after it had been put on the cereals for a few years. Or the good thing about potatoes, which come onto as well, was that the potatoes kind of was a break crop, because it was a root crop and not a grain crop. It rested the soil to some extent between the grains. In other parts of the country, in Armagh, there was rotations like potatoes, wheat, oats, barley, and then clover. Oats, barley, clover, oats. And it seemed to be in the east of the province, they would have done a more English rotation and put clover into the soil, which was always good for refreshing the ground, because clover would have brought nitrogen back into the soil. Like I said, the only manure that they would have had would have been animal manure, but they used a lot of lime. The limestone was burnt in kilns and then spread over the ground in the winter time. Lime itself isn't really a fertilizer, but when it balances the pH of the ground, and if you have the pH at the right level, it allows the ground to release more nutrients than it would than if it was a bit more acidic. So lime was used a lot on agriculture from the 1750 right through the modern day in Ulster and Irish agriculture, especially in the places where lime was available. Either you got your lime out of the ground in a quarry, or else you got this sort of marl clay, which was a kind of limestone clay that they spread on the ground in certain places, or around the seashore. They would burn the seashells in order to release lime from them and then spread them on the ground as well. Crop yields were relatively low. McAvoy would talk about 20 stones of grain been planted to the Irish acre. Now, the yield then off the Irish acre then off that there might only be about half a tonne or a bit more than half a tonne. So you're not, for the amount of grain putting in, you're not getting a tremendous return. But again, this was in days before that there was any fertiliser and before you had sort of high quality plant varieties that were higher yielders. Manure was fertiliser started to be introduced in Ireland from the 1840s. Guano, which is bat or bird droppings imported from South America, started to appear from 1844. Interestingly enough, just before the famine, and the guano was one of the things that was blamed for bringing in the blight, because it came from South America and the blight had been in South America, but it doesn't seem that was the actual reason for the blight coming to Ireland. The guano was very popular. It was important in Ireland right up until the 1920s and 1930s. One of Ireland's exports was actually animal bones. The animal bones weren't used in Ireland as a fertiliser, but they were taken to England and were used in England as a fertiliser. And it was a number of years, it was after the famine before they started to use animal bones here as a fertiliser. Animal bones are a rich source of phosphate, and they found out then after the 1860s that if you treated the animal bones with sulfuric acid, you got what you call superphosphate, which is a more soluble form of phosphate and was a better fertiliser. Other places that they would have got the phosphate from would have been from mines in the United States as well. Also from South America, they brought in nitrate of soda from Chile, which also acted as a sort of a high nitrogen fertiliser. Start, it wasn't really trusted that well. People preferred the guano because they could understand the guano, bird droppings, manure, could see the connection, but sodium with nitrate was very slowly taken on. Other products then, after that there, towards the end of the century, ammonia sulfate, it was a byproduct of the coal distillation gas process, so it was another form of reagent, and then basic slag, byproduct of the steelmaking industry, was another form of phosphate. Potash, as the name suggests, was a burnt ash of wood, a good source of potassium, and again from the late 1800s you had potassium being mined in various places and brought into Ireland. So yields started to improve after that point in time. Alright, just to quickly say, I mentioned about 20 stones being sold to the Irish acre. Just want to make a very quick point about the difference between Irish acres and English acres. The Irish acre is about 1.5 times or 1.61 times the size of the English acre. The reason the difference, and the Irish mile was longer than the English mile, it all goes back to what they call was the unit of measurement called the perch. Now, in England, 12 inches was a foot, and 3 feet was a yard. Where the two systems then changed was at the next level. A pole or a perch in length was 5.5 English yards, and then a square perch was 5.5 yards. By 5.5 yards, a square perch was the smallest unit of measurement in the measurement of land. There were 40 perches in a rood, which was a quarter of an acre of land, and then there was 4 roods in an acre. So you had 160 perches in an acre. So an English acre was 4,840 square yards. Irish perch, 7 yards long. Square perch then was 49 square yards. There's still 160 perches in the acre and 4 roods in the acre, but then it meant that there was 7,840 square yards in the Irish acre. So the Irish acre is also sometimes known as the Cunningham acre. So if you come across it in the literature, Irish acre, Cunningham acres are the larger acres. English acre or the plantation acre is the smaller acre. And the same goes for the mile. Then the varieties of oats that they would have had, there were a number of different varieties. There was a variety called potato oats, there was small oats, there was cold oats, and there was, later on there was Dutch oats, barley oats, there was Angus, there was Sandy oats. By the 1900s you had improved varieties like Banner, $1,000, even had a variety called Wide Awake. Early varieties, early plant breeders was kind of hit and miss affair. For example, potato oats started off that a bunch of oats were found growing at the side of a Dutch potato field in Scotland, but they seemed to be quite high yielding, and they bred them up, and that was where the potato oats came from, a variety that was quite popular, say about 1800. Moving on to the harvest, all the early Irish oats, from prehistoric times, Bronze Age times, right up to, I would say, around the 1700s, we cut with the sickle. You see the way it's coming here, it's holding the grain in one hand and cutting the sickle in the other hand. This is a much slower process than using the scythe, but the sickle works very well where you have a crop maybe that's lying flat, it's been flattened by the weather, or where maybe it's got overripe, and rather than shaking with the scythe, you're able to hold it and cut it with the sickle. The scythe, when it came in Ireland around the 1750s, but it wasn't really very well adopted in all areas. But certainly by the time you get 1850, the scythe would have been adopted in most areas where it would have been useful. Upland areas, mountainy areas where there had been quite large stones in the field, the sickle was still better than the scythe. But obviously, the Irish took the scythe fairly quickly at that, after 1780s, because Irish harvesters would have migrated to England to do the English harvest and come back to their own homes to do their own harvest, and they would normally have cut with scythes. Next stage then in the technology was the reaper. The one here in the photograph, if you can see it, is these teeth here. It's actually a board. It's called a tilting board, and there are two men on the mower. One of them's directing the horse, and then the other one is looking after the tilting board. And what the tilting board did was, instead of just leaving the straw on the ground to be gathered up, the people had probably stuck it. It left a bundle of straw, so it was much easier to gather up the straw and to make the sheaf. So that was the next advance. Well, first of all, the reaper was just cut the corn and left it to the side, and then with the tilting board, it was easier for the gatherers coming afterwards to make the sheaves. And then another thing in here is a reaper binder, so like a McCormick reaper binder. At that point, not only did the machine cut the corn, but it also had a binder on it, which meant it could tie the sheaf up and put a knot in it. So it made the process a lot quicker. And then next stage of the process really was getting rid of the horse and put the binder on behind the tractor. They still had the sheaves. They still had to be stuck in the field to finally dry them out and to ripen them, but it also required less help. These guys here are sticking the sheaves in the field. The Irish harvest, or any harvest in any part of the world, always takes a lot of people, because you can plant a certain amount of people. The number of people that it takes to plant a certain area of ground, there won't be enough people to harvest the ground using like the scythe technology and the hand technology. So everybody is pressed in the service at the harvest time, young and old, and even this old lady here, she's getting a wee cup of tea behind the stuck. When the sticks were in the field and they were dry enough, then they were taken to the haggard or the stackyard. So loaded onto, in this case, a horse and trap, or a horse and cart, and taken to the stackyard. This here, the stackyard would normally be somewhere close to the farm, where the straw would be stacked for the winter time, and then would be thrashed in winter time. Once the harvest was gathered in, it was a year of great celebration. In different parts of the country, there was different traditions over the last sheaf. What would happen in a field, in the last field, a certain amount of corn would be left standing, and then this would be, when the rest of the field was finished, all you'd have would be this last piece of corn standing, which would be the size of, to make a good decent sheaf. Then the idea was, there were different traditions about who would cut the sheaf, and here they seem to have a bit of sport of trying to cut the sheaf with the sickles. Last sheaf was a very, very important, go back to pre-Christian times, even in Ireland. It would have been associated with Bridget, who brought the harvest, who was the goddess of the land. So she brought fertility of the land. The last sheaf, even here in this house, is hanging up over the table. And one of the ideas around the last sheaf would be that you would mix the last sheaf of corn with the new grain going out to sow in the springtime, to sort of carry on the fertility from one year into the other. I mean, every sort of area has its own traditions. There are also traditions of sort of harvest knots, but the harvest knot tradition would be an English tradition that would come in really with the plantation, but would be quite common in a number of different areas as well. Then, next stage in the process then was the flailing the straw to release the grain. In the most basic way, the straw was just beaten off stones like this here. That would have been quite uncommon. It's been a very primitive method. More usually it was done with flails. The head was, the grain and the straw were still together, and then it was beaten on the ground with these flails onto a sheet. And then the straw was lifted off, and the straw was lifted off, didn't have any grain on it, and then the grain was left on the sheet. Again here with a flail, there with a flail. Then you had your straw, you had your grain, you had your chaff, you had bits of chaff in there, bits of straw, you had dirt in there, you had everything. In order to get clean grain, you had to winnow the grain, and this basically involved throwing the grain up into the air on a breezy day. The breeze then would carry the chaff and the light bits of material to one side, and then hopefully the cleaner grain would come back down onto the ground, onto your sheet, and that was how you cleaned your corn in the early days. It was quite often done on the hillside, because there was more breeze on the hillside. This is a photograph from the Green Collection just showing that there. Then, more advanced methods then, once you get to the 1890s, you start to have winnowing machines being put into barns. This is actually the combined one that took the grain from the straw and cleaned the straw all in one process. That there would be connected either to a water wheel outside the barn, or else it would be connected to a horse ring. So you had a horse going round a circle, and then through a set of gears it would turn the barn fan, or the barn harvester here as well, as we have here. And then the final stage in the process would have been thrasher. That's the word I'm looking for, thrasher. That last thing wasn't a barn fan, it was a barn thrasher, for it thrashed the grain just like the flails would have done. So the thrasher, as we have here, from the 1910 onward, really, in Ireland, would have been a contractor's machine mostly, and went round the small farms to the stackyards, and so the corn stack when went through the thrasher. There'd been a lot of help from the neighbours would have come round, and then you would have repaid them with good food or decent quantity of food during the day, and then whenever the thrasher went to your neighbour's stackyard, you went there as well and given him a hand out. Then the final stage, the corn would have been taken to a mill and ground down to cornmeal, or in more primitive times, one of these grindstones. Again, one of the things about the Green collection, he liked to, as well as photographing traditions that were still ongoing, he liked to photograph old traditions that maybe hadn't been used for a number of years, but if the technology was still there, he liked to take photographs of them. So it was very unlikely that in the age of photography anybody was still using a grindstone. That's Oats. Hopefully I'll come back maybe towards the end just to say a few words about oat recipes. Potatoes then, very much a shorter history in Ireland. Potatoes, as you know, originated in the Andes in South America. They were brought back to Europe probably first of all by the Spanish. The Spanish word for potato is patata, so it's just a direct following from the Spain. Whenever they're brought to England and Ireland around the 1580s, 1590s, as a vegetable they were used as a garnish to a meal. They weren't really used to bulk out a meal. It was more like an extra on the plate. They wouldn't have been, so it was the middle class, upper class people that would have used these new vegetables in Ireland. However, it seems that by about 60, 70 years later, by 1670, the potato has moved out across all classes in Ireland and is very much been accepted by the people of Ireland. One of the reasons maybe for this quick acceptance of the potato was again to do with strife that had been in Ireland over the previous 100 years. Potatoes are a crop, unlike oats or barley. You can't burn them in the field. It's hard to destroy them in the field. You plant them, you can go away, and you come back 4 months later, you have a crop of potatoes. So some people feel that maybe that was one of the reasons that they gained very quick acceptance in Ireland at that time period. Move on further quickly through some of this stuff. Classically, people associate the potato with the famine, associate the potato with a system of agriculture called lazy beds, and then lazy bed is associated with these, what looks like a very, very clumsy type of spade. But lazy bed system was a system of very intense agriculture. It was very well thought out, and the spades from the various parts of the country and the various shapes were very much crafted to the particular need of making the lazy beds in that part of the country. There's a few examples there of different spade types. Even in Ulster, in one area, Pattern Spade Mill had a book of about over 300 patterns of different spades. And as you went through other parts of the country, there have been similar but different examples of spades. It was just one of those instruments in Ireland that was so important for the poor from about 1710 onwards. Spade culture. It was the reason that the population of Ireland was able to get to 8.33 million. The method, or one method of making the rigid, this would be a very difficult one. And if you ever go to anywhere where they actually have competitions for loy digging, this would be the method used. Making lazy beds isn't about digging the ground, it's more about turning the ground over. It's about the least effort to make the lazy bed, but to give the most production back. And I'll not go through this whole diagram, but rather than digging the ground, it was about nicking into the ground and turning the ground over. Then the potato was planted on the ground, on the fold of the ground that was turned over. Now, the great thing about the potato in terms of Irish agriculture was that it grew basically on any ground, even very, very poor ground. So what happened as Irish population grew, agriculture moved up the hillsides, and here's another example here just of the lazy bed. I think it was after a lorry digging competition. Lazy beds here in County Antrim, Glen Shesk, I think. So agriculture was able to go up the hillside, move on to poor ground, but potatoes were very good because they were able to break underground. The root system actually, when broken, hard, tough ground that never supported crops, and broke it down into the sort of ground where you could grow crops on after a few years of potatoes. But what happened in certain places, the landlord would have given the ground free for maybe a period of time, maybe 5 years, even up to 7 years. After that point in time, you'd be expected to pay for it. But you would labour the ground for 7 years, but it was basically ground that was more or less worthless. But after labouring for 7 years with the spade culture and with potatoes, and maybe you couldn't grow potatoes on it continuously, but the ground would be in much better shape. This contributed to the population growth because a young man could build a small cabin, he could get a bit of bad ground up the hillside, and he could get married. And basically in those days, among the poor, marriage was one of the few comforts that they had. So population grew quite rapidly from mid-1780s right up to famine times. Very technical picture here again is using a spade, quite similar to our law here. This is a scene that you don't have to go that far around the west coast of Ireland to find small fields, you go up a hillside, and you can still see the marks of the old potato ridges on them, which they'll never go away because those fields never get ploughed, and they really are a relic of the 1850s because nobody after the famine was over, nobody went back to cultivate those fields. They went back to grass, maybe grazed to cattle, but the ridges are still beyond them. Even on my own farm, there's certain bits of rough ground where you'll still see the old kind of ridges on them. Conscious of time. As I said, small house. This is a single room cabin we have at the Ulster Folk Park. So this one is built out of stone, but quite often the single room cabins would be built out of sods, left to make it even cheaper. Then the classic thing about potatoes was that they reckoned that an acre, in which case this would be an Irish acre, would have supported a family of 2 adults and maybe four children. As the diet deteriorated coming up to the famine, it would be potatoes and buttermilk if you were well off, and potatoes and water if you weren't well off. The difference between potatoes and buttermilk and potatoes and water is that if you get potatoes and buttermilk, you have a complete diet. The buttermilk gives you the protein, the potatoes and some vitamins. The potatoes give you the carbohydrates and the other vitamins, and basically you can, I won't say it's a healthy diet, but it's not a bad diet. Without the buttermilk, it's not quite as good. But it was still, it wasn't a diet that could give rise to a lot of nutritional diseases. This here is, get this right. This is a skib. Basically, potatoes were boiled on the pot over the fire. They're drained into the skib and just left there, and then the children and the adults would have just peeled the potatoes in the skib and eaten them. In earlier times, there was enough potatoes to go around that you could have kept a pig as well. You could have sold the pig, you had a few pounds, but as time went on, the pressure of of land, the cost of land, meant that the poorer and poorer and less access to land. So whereas before they might have had a cow and be able to make some butter and sell butter, maybe growing a wee bit of oats and growing potatoes, as time went on, first and had a pig to fatten on the waste products. As time went on, the cow disappeared. They couldn't afford to grow the oats anymore, and they were basically down to subsistence on the potato. What would have happened would have been, as cottiers, they would have got a piece of ground. The farmer would maybe have put manure on it, prepared it for them, and then they would have paid for that ground with their labour. There would have been so many days in the year that they would have to work for the farmer, but it basically would have come maybe out as 4 or 5 days of labour per week all around the year. And all I had for it was this product ground and the potatoes. And a good year when the potatoes grew well, it was okay, it worked. In a bad year, they could be forced to beg. This is just another example of potato basket for draining potatoes. This one here is a skiog. Would be found in Ulster, Munster and the Midlands. The earlier one, the skip, been found throughout Ireland as well, but was mostly, it would have been seen more often on the western seaboard. This is quite a nice example of one that's at one of the museum collection, but it was made by a modern basket weaver, so it was more, the ones that they would have used in the wee cabins wouldn't have been quite as fancy as that there, but the principle was still been the same. Potatoes, the other method of making growing potatoes would have been in drills. You have people in the 70s, like Arthur Young, would have commented about, progressive farmers were growing putting potatoes into drills and very fine agriculture, and then these other less progressive farmers were using spade culture. But in his book he also had to admit that the ones that used spade culture actually got better yields per acre. But obviously it took more labour input with spade culture than it did with drill culture. Potatoes kept fairly easily over the winter. Johnny put into potato pit, pretty pit, covered with rushes and then covered with clay to keep the frost out. So different varieties of potatoes were grown. Some potatoes were early varieties, so you could eat them in August. Some were late varieties, so they keep well in the winter and last right until May or June. But July was always a very hungry month because no potatoes kept into July. Some parts of the country that have talked about July of the cabbage, or hungry July, or even June and July would be hungry months, and the new potatoes would be greeted with great happiness. One of the reasons the potatoes did so well in Ireland up until 1840 was because they didn't really have any pests. There was a thing called leaf curd, which was an aphis. It was a virus spread by aphis, which you would have got like in England and parts of Europe, which could limit potato yields. But in Ireland, we didn't have so much, because the weather wasn't high enough and warm enough for long enough. Didn't have the same problem with the virus because of the aphis. The Colorado beetle, which you would have heard of it, never came to Britain. It started off in Colorado. The beetle ate other plants that were very like the potato, and then when the potato came to Colorado in the 1860s, it moved on through the potato, and it kept moving on through potato plants. It eventually arrived in Europe during the First World War as a unfortunate byproduct or side issue from the American soldiers where they seemed to bring the Colorado beetle, and it got established in Europe, but it never got across the channel to the UK. The other disease that potatoes would be is a potato cyst nematode. At first came into the UK in the 1880s, but again, at the times we were talking about in the famine times, the only problem that they had was the blight. And the blight was never controlled really in Ireland until 1885 with Bordeaux mixture, which was a mixture of copper sulphate and slaked lime. First used in vineyards in France around at the same time, they realised it kept down fungal infections and vines, then it translated also to the potatoes. I'll just very quickly run through the food aspect of it. Porridge, also known as stirabout, cooked in water or milk, taken with cream or fresh cream, flavoured with salt, butter, or honey. These are the poor foods everybody had. Classic one would be oat cakes, made very simply and then hardened in front of the fire. I brought down what they call a hardening stand, put in front of the open fire to sort of bake off the oat cakes. So they're very, potatoes and oats, very easy to make into food. Potatoes even easier to cook. Oats had to be ground first, but mixed with butter and hot water to make a thick paste. The oat cake then was dried in front of the fire. Could last for a few months, or could even be used on a seed voyage. We haven't been across in time of sale. Oat cakes were one of the things that might sustain you on your voyage. This here is flummery, which is sort of a byproduct of the oats. The leftovers of the oats from the milling process, the residue of the milling will be steeped in hot water for a few days, and you got a liquid called sourins, which could be drank, and then what was left over of this sort of residue then was known as a flummery. It was strained down, and then it could be and thickened. But basically, it was strained down, and then the water boiled off it, so it could take on up to mornings like consistency. But it really was the sweetness of the flour of the mill. Oat cakes would have been much more nutritious. Just to say a few quick words about potatoes. Sometimes they're only be half boiled. The reason they're only be half boiled was because then they're harder to digest, and they would stick to the ribs, so you won't get as hungry as quick. This was obviously in times when people really didn't have enough to eat, and the longer the potato stayed in the stomach, the better it was. We're talking about not as a new one of me that I came across just as preparing this here, not boiling the moon out of the potato. If you only half boil a potato and you cut it in half, you see in the centre there's kind of a hard circle like the moon, and the moon's still in the potato, then it'll stick to your ribs a lot longer because the starch hasn't been properly cooked. Unfortunately, the problem is when you do that there, the starch isn't fully cooked. It's kind of more like fibre and passes through your system. So it's not nutritious, but it seems to fill you up longer. Sometimes these people that were lived in the single room cabins and the poor houses, the only things that were the flavour to potatoes was occasionally would have been a bit of herring, or even sometimes just the head of a piece of herring to try to flavour the potatoes. So we're talking about people that are really, really poor. Concannon is basically pounded potatoes mixed with chopped onions, cabbage, or kale. Quite often it was used at Halloween, so which was a fast day, so there wasn't any bacon or meat put in through it. Another one would be boxty. Boxty is like potato bread, but it's not potato bread. Boxty is whenever you peel your raw potato and you grate it, and then you place it in a muslin bag and you squeeze all the water out of it. Then what's left, you mix that sort of potato residue then with flour, add salts and herbs. What's squeezed out is the starch, could be used as a stiffener for your shirt. But boxty was another traditional recipe all through Ireland. The wee rain would go boxty on the griddle, boxty on the pan, the one in the middle, that's the one for Marianne. If you don't eat boxty, you're never going to man. Another one, champ, which is kind of like Concannon but with less in it. Basically mixed up with milk, and flavoured with scallions or fresh nettles. some people would call it poundies. Molly went to go that there. She's up with her beetle and she broke the lamp. Then she had room to beetle her champ, so basically pound in the potatoes in a small area, and she did damage with the beetle. And then the final slide I have is just of potato bread itself. Potato bread, basically leftover potatoes or freshly boiled potatoes mixed with flour and then baked over to griddle. Sometimes also known as fudge. And then one final wee slide from the bean collection again. It's different kind of hardened land, again oat cakes in front of the fire, and sort of poor house that where potatoes are known for the main parts of the diet. Seem to have taken up a lot longer time than I thought for this lecture, so if there's any questions I'll be happy to try to take.